Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. One aspect within this show that I speak of frequently is the idea of experiencing life itself as a psychedelic. For me, this has always been the goal, as I have come to realize that what I originally loved about psychedelic medicines was their ability to open me up to new perspectives. However, my biggest challenge in my younger years was coming back to quote-unquote reality and wishing I could experience that type of magic more frequently. As such, my entire life over the last 10 years has been focused on achieving this goal, and in today's episode, we are going to be chatting with an individual who has taken this idea to the absolute max in his life. From undergoing multiple intense neurofeedback sessions designed to help him train his brainwaves just like Zen monks do, to be able to access the mystical states associated with them whenever he chooses, to diving into many different forms of inner work designed to help him become more heart-centered, it is safe to say that for him, life has truly become the psychedelic. And my hope for each of you today during our chat is that you are also able to realize that this is possible, and that you pick up some new tips and strategies for achieving this goal in your own life. So, without further ado, please help me in welcoming my man, Anthony Flores, to the show. Anthony, my man, it's a pleasure to have you here with me today. For everyone tuning in, we were just joking about how I just had to put a pack of frozen blueberries on my camera because for some reason it's overheated today. So I'm super excited to have you here, man. And I'd love to start out by having you share a little bit of your background with the guests, specifically with reference to your intro into psychedelics. And of course, we're going to be getting into neurofeedback, meditation, everything else. But, you know, to be on brand for the Psychedelic podcast, tell us a little bit about how you got into psychedelics and everything that you are into at the present day.
Yeah, first of all, super grateful to be here. Big fan of your work. And I'm really thankful for Shaker for introducing us. Yeah, you know, I think I was a relatively later bloomer in terms of getting into psychedelics. I'd heard about them, you know, for years before I, ever tried them. I mean, I did, I guess if you count marijuana as like, or cannabis as a psychedelic, like, you know, I experimented like that, like, in college, like everyone else, but I didn't get into really more of what it would be more of like the significant, psychedelics until much later. And I think one of the things that would be cool to touch upon today that maybe is unique about my journey is we chatted about this before briefly, that I went heavily into brainwave training before I ever really did like ayahuasca or ketamine or any of the more significant psychedelic kind of journeys. And I think that really influenced my path in and out of psychedelics and my experiences. And I think in ways that would be, my hope is like really meaningful or helpful for anyone who's looking to use them as a tool or modality. So yeah. And how I got into, just to step back, like brainwave training is also known as neurofeedback. And for anybody that's like new to that domain, because not everyone knows what that is, essentially that involves putting electrodes, sensors on the scalp that read your EEG, so it reads your brainwaves. And then there's a way to just read it, but then there's technology that will essentially give you sound or give your brain a reward for producing more specific brainwaves. So if you're training alpha, for example, you will hear more sound, like more either white noise or chimes or bells, like if you're producing more of an alpha brainwave. And then most systems too, if your brain, the hemispheres of your brain are in coherence or synchrony, it will produce an additional sound. And so your brain is not only getting rewarded for producing more amplitude of a specific wave, but then also being synchronous or coherent, like the two hemispheres firing together with that wave. And so with neurofeedback, your brain learns a wave much more rapidly because it's like it's getting a mirror. A lot of times we don't see our brain and what our brain is doing, but this is sort of a way to like give your brain real time, instant feedback and rewards for producing. And that's part of how the brain works, is through rewards. Even in life, our brain is constantly looking for like rewards as feedback of like, if is it doing something right or is it doing something not right. And so yeah, I got into that. I was listening to a Dave Asprey podcast, and he was talking about this neurofeedback intensive where your IQ goes. You spend a week just training your brain, and all these amazing things happen. Like your IQ goes up, and your emotional intelligence goes up, and you become more in flow state, and your executive functioning. I was like, this sounds amazing. So I found the company that was offering it, and I reached out to them, and I ended up going to this. They were in Sedona, and they had developed a protocol that's really cool. It's essentially using alpha brainwaves and forgiveness. And so you would train alpha, and alpha essentially really, alpha is connected to joy and to gratitude and to flow state. And so by going deeper into alpha, you have more, what I would say is access to your heart or to your emotional body, and which is very connected to your whole unconscious and all of your feelings, all of your emotions, traumas, everything. And so when you're in a deeper state of alpha and you forgive, it's like you're really letting go at a deeper level. And what was cool is like what you would see when you would go into deep alpha, and then you would go back into something in your past and you would feel it fully, and then you would forgive, you would actually see a huge spike because you could see it on the screen. That was what was kind of cool, is you could see like, and then your brain was making the connection. Wow, if I forgive and I let go of this thing, my alpha spikes massively, and you have this huge rush of joy and freedom. And so it was really, really helpful. And a lot of people who go through this experience, there's so many miracles. Like they would clear a lot of trauma, a lot of resentment, a lot of pain. They would like sometimes they would forgive a family member they hadn't spoken to for a decade, and all of a sudden that person would call them. Like really trippy stuff would happen. And so I did one of those intensives, and it was really life-changing for me at the time because I was very depleted with I was very stimulated, and my work, I had come out of a long relationship that was pretty toxic, and so I used that training really helped like completely reset me. And with 1 week, my brainwave started to show the signature of like monks who had meditated for like 20 years. And then it was after I got out of that, like my ability to experience joy and just be in flow and be more productive, like it shot up. And what was cool about that, it was very much like a psychedelic without any compounds. So while I was training, I would have these incredible visions, and like the level of imagination and colors and things that I would see, it was really mind blowing. It was like a psychedelic experience. But the cool thing was that I was like using my own brain. I was learning how to use my own brain to sort of navigate the state. And that was a big thing that I learned, is that brain waves, especially higher levels of specific brain waves, that could be theta, could be gamma, could be alpha. And just for anyone listening, like delta is the slowest. That's what we experience in sleep, but you can experience that awake. Theta is like the lucid, dreamy kind of just above delta. Alpha is above theta. That's what we were just talking about. Beta is what we're in most of the time, but most people are in beta too often, which is fight or flight. We do need beta though to focus, and most of the drugs like Adderall and Ritalin, those really activate beta for focus. The challenge is that people have trouble downshifting out of that stressful sort of hyperactive fight or flight. And then gamma, which is interesting, is a very mystical, but also it's just powerful on many levels, cognition, memory, a lot of different things. That is above beta. So when we have a lot of psychedelics, and we'll talk about this more in a bit, they tend to increase theta and gamma a lot. So training theta and gamma brainwaves, in my opinion, really help someone I mean, all brainwaves do, because we experience all brainwaves all the time, but improving your capacity to navigate theta and gamma especially really help you in a psychedelic experience, because those brainwaves get activated very heavily on something like ayahuasca or ketamine or even MDMA. I'm sure I'd like to see charts on that, but I know for sure ketamine. I've looked at like studies on those, and so yeah, that it's really really helpful to have gone through those kinds of experiences. And so I did a whole series of these week-long intensives, and it turned out that I had gifts in this area. Like I broke a bunch of like, there's a lot of amazing people. This was surprising to me because like they had Tony Robbins and Jim Quick and all of these people that were really mentally gifted, and I had broken some of the different records in like alpha and gamma and delta and these brainwave trainings, and I learned how to. This was a little more esoteric. I learned how to basically use energy in my spine, sort of like what people call Kundalini energy, this energy that rises up the spine. I could use this energy in my nervous system to just control my brainwaves up and down. And for each brainwave, there was like a different state associated with. So I would just go into that state, and then I would use the energy to sort of like move the levels of that brainwave up or down. And so even to this day, I think psychedelics have like amazing applications, and I still like explore them when I feel drawn to. But I also, because of this capacity and through all this training, I can also just access like a very psychedelic or a very altered state through my brainwaves, like anytime that I want. So that's just like a little preface to my background.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show. Dude, Anthony, that is so cool, man. And I remember when we connected, you were telling me about that. And I think they actually call that now 20 years of Zen or something like that, right? They call that program.
40 years of Zen, because there's research that, like this week of intensive training produces like the brainwave equivalent of like 21 to 40 years of Zen meditation. Wow. And where I had gone to, especially in Gamma, was like the equivalent of a monk who had put in like 50,000 hours of meditation.
Damn.
And so, and what I noticed from that was just like no more anxiety, no overwhelm, like always just ability to like regulate my stress levels or whatever was going on to be calm or non-attached, no matter what was happening in my life or environment. And of course, like there's a lot of like productivity benefits and a lot of other things like that. And then in the psychedelic domain, which I'll talk about some of my experiences there. Yeah, I always had profound and never. I think shadow experiences have their place, because like everybody has to go through certain things, and I definitely had some of those like heavier experiences in the psychedelic journeys, but I could always navigate it in such a way that I was just able to take the meaning or the lesson or the healing from it, and then move forward what felt like pretty efficiently, and then get to this like really expansive place that I think most people are looking for when they do a psychedelic.
Yeah, 100%, man. Like, I love this because part of the reason I made this show, right, is to illuminate what psychedelics are doing scientifically, and then how we can connect with these, even if we don't want to connect with the psychedelic, right? How can we connect with these results if we don't want to necessarily have a psychedelic experience, right? And also, what I love about this is it's really like just a great way to integrate, because you get direct feedback, right? Pardon the pun of neurofeedback, but you get this direct feedback through the reward systems of the brain to be able, and again, because you're hooked up too, to actually understand what alpha is compared to theta, compared to delta or gamma or any of these waves. Because, when we hear these, right, like, we might understand like, oh, alpha's flow state, right? And we get there every once in a while, but then we don't, right? And then we might need psychedelics to get back there, and we remember and then we forget and all these things. And so being able to have some sense of order and ability to contextualize like how these brainwaves feel in our everyday life so that we can train them more is absolutely epic. And, it's really cool too, because, this is one of the great things about technology, right? Is that, yes, it would be great if we could all spend 50,000 hours meditating, right? But we have lives and we have things we want to do too. And so this allows you to have your cake, eat it too, and it's gluten-free, so it's an all-in-one hit.
Yes.
That's too funny.
Yes. And you mentioned, something I think we can definitely, we should probably go deeper in, because I think it's a huge topic of integration. And one of the things that I like as a framework, especially in the context of psychedelics, is you're familiar with Dr. David Hawkins and the map of consciousness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think most people have, where it goes anywhere from 0 to 1,000, and above 500 is love. And you start to get really spiritually connected and expanded. There's some people that I've done work with, really amazing human beings, and they went very, very deep into Hawkins. They have a company called Focus Life Force Energy, and they developed a parallel scale called the level of functioning. And so basically, because what happens a lot of times, and I think this is a very common psychedelic phenomenon, is your level of consciousness goes up very rapidly. But sometimes when our consciousness goes up very rapidly, there's this gap between our functioning, like our ability to actually function at that higher level of consciousness. And usually when someone is like spaced out or having trouble, like they don't want to do life anymore, or like they're like, we've all, I think, had that experience after a psychedelic. Like, what does it all mean? And a lot of times it's because the functioning hasn't risen to match the consciousness shift that has occurred during the psychedelic. Because in the psychedelic, everything is blown open and you see the universe and you see all these higher things, and the limits of your perspective are sort of shattered, and it's really profound. I think that's one of the things that makes it such a life altering experience. But the more then I think that you can get your ability to function at that higher level of consciousness up, I think that's like a huge part of integration and what we would call, and that's the reason I'm bringing that up, is that I think brainwave training and neurofeedback is a way to speed up and to enhance integration, because it allows you, essentially gives you like control over the gear shifter in a car. It's like in a psychedelic, you're going really, really fast, and then you've got to then be able to like come back into life and downshift, or to kind of hit all these different gears and steer the car. And when you can control your brain waves more effectively, like then you can actually just function. You're not just like locked into that one state that you experience. Because I think a lot of people, you go into the super expanded state, and then you just go back into your old way, and that's painful. And so you're kind of like in this no man's land. But with more skill in being able to navigate brainwaves and altered states, you can be like, oh, okay, I need to write an email. Like I've literally come out of ayahuasca, and like in 5 minutes I could just like send an email to someone in a completely like non-expanded way, and then I could be like back in, and then I could just like shift back into the expanded state. And I think that's a really important skill for integration or ability, is to like, and you seem, I don't know you that well, but you seem like someone who's like very, I know you haven't and I'm excited for you to actually explore more of the brain training, but you seem like someone that has experienced a lot of expansion in the psychedelic space and beyond, but you actually function really, really well too in your business and in the world. And I think that's like the art of this. And the more that we can have both, then the more impact like we can have, and the more we can take this expanded consciousness that we have and actually like create from that place in the world.
100%. And Anthony, thank you for the kind words too. It's great to know I'm received in that way. And, what I found is that like my whole mission is to allow people to experience a life that is psychedelic, right? And so like the argument, if you will, for integration that I tell people is like, listen, I get it that a lot of people might hear integration and think, homework? Like, I don't want to do that, right? But yeah, exactly. Boring. But if they actually understood what that word truly meant in terms of experience, they would care a lot more of it. And that's why this conversation is so powerful already. And we're only 18 minutes in, like, because now we're actually putting experience into the conversation where like, this is how you create an entire life that is psychedelic. And when you do so, you don't get stuck in the thirst trap of believing that you need psychedelics to access these states. They're simply there to create gained awareness. But it's up to us from that awareness to then actually do our end of the bargain. I say with cannabis often, cannabis will give you the what. It's up to us to figure out the how, And I think that a lot of, it's obviously multifaceted, but I think one of the challenges of living in a left brain world is that we think like we go to ayahuasca, we get a result, right? And it's like, it's not really that linear, it's kind of like this in most, psychedelic journeys, and some can leave us more confused and with more questions than we came in with. One of the things that I loved that you were saying too is that, there's a lot that I love you were saying, but I'm really fascinated with theta brainwaves with regards to them being the doorway to the subconscious. And you were talking about how you can get in there and you can resolve trauma and all these kind of things. And obviously that has a ton of good points to it with regards to what resolving trauma can do for your entire being. But being able to understand what these brainwaves are responsible for. So then when we're actually looking to do a specific thing, like, create something or think or, resolve trauma or relax or any of these things, and we also understand how to train our brainwaves to get to those desired states, then we empower ourselves, And I imagine like, obviously I know this is what Joe Dispenza talks a lot about too, but I think that's the challenge is that not everyone has the time to really like spend diving into these individual brainwaves on their own and all that trial and error. And so to be able to have services like this that can do that is unbelievable. And one of the things I'm curious on, just out of my own curiosity, is, I've looked into neurofeedback before, and one of the things actually that I'll even say before that is one of the modalities I use is brain integration therapy. Have you ever heard of that before?
I have, yeah. I've never done it though, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's like a form of kinesiology, and I imagine they're working with brainwaves and doing all these things, but it's fucking fascinating. I feel like you would have a field day with it. I'm not even sure if you would need it at this point, but it's really, really cool. And, I've looked up neurofeedback, and my question for you is all neurofeedback the same? Like, are there different types of it? Like, for instance, if I wanted to go do this 40 years of Zen thing, but maybe I was like, oh, I can't travel right now. I have a neurofeedback person near my house. What are the chances that different forms of neurofeedback are similar? Like, are they all based on one thing? Do they focus on different things? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, these intensives, one of the intensives are incredibly powerful, but they do have some downsides. They require travel. You have to go away and unplug for 5 to 7 days, and then the price is out of reach for most people. Even when I was starting, I'm in marketing, so I couldn't even afford them fully. Like, this is 6-7 years ago, and I was like trading some marketing services in part for them because they're like usually no less than 10 or 12, but sometimes up to $15,000 for the week. So that's out of reach for a lot of people. And the challenge with like local, there are like, there are neurofeedback clinicians everywhere. The challenge is that most of them are, which have value still, but most of them are looking at corrective measures like for ADHD or things like that. And neurofeedback is really good. It's showing a lot of promising research for focus and for mood and things like that. But they're not really looking at it. They're not looking at it that much from a consciousness healing point of view. Neurofeedback as more of like a healing, self-awareness, self-discovery modality is actually still pretty young. The one company that like I started with them, they have been doing it for 30 years. And then Dave's has been around for at least like 6, 7, 8 years. And I think that there's others probably that will emerge in the future. But again, that's the intensive model. One of the most exciting developments in the space is a company called Sensei. It's SENS.ai. And we can give that link. And it's not an affiliate link or anything like that. It's just something that I think is really exciting to share. It's basically like the first clinical grade neurofeedback technology that does all the brain waves, but at home and through your phone. Because when you go to one of these intensives, or a clinician, you've got to wire up all these electrodes. You have to know where to place them. You've got to put gel on your scalp. You've got to have like the devices at home. Even those are 6,000. The amplifier is expensive. Anyways, it's very prohibitive. But with this device is around $1,000 to $1,400, I think, depending on sales and whatever. So, and it will last many years. And essentially, again, it's like having a clinician, but not just a clinician in the sense like I was saying about ADHD or things like that, but actually tilted more towards healing and meditation and doing unconscious work and doing that inner work. And so they're actually just beginning. There's probably a back order right now because they just barely launching, and they had a huge backlog of orders to fulfill from their Indiegogo and all of that. But still, if someone were to order today, I think that they could probably get one in like 3 to 6 months. That's what I would recommend most highly for anybody who wants to do, because there are tools like Muse and a few other solutions, or there's like stimulation technology. I forget the name of some of these other devices, but basically, neurofeedback is unique in the sense that it's requiring that your brain produce. It's not just stimulating your brain with frequencies like binaural beats do. It's asking your brain to produce something from scratch, and then gives you feedback based on what you're producing. And it's a completely different level of learning than just getting the stimulation. So it's really cool. We're at this point in time where neurofeedback has been this type of neurofeedback has been basically inaccessible for most people. And now we're at this tipping point where it's about to become highly accessible to a lot of people. And people can do this if they want to become a better meditator. They can do it before they do a psychedelic journey to, again, like I was saying, to learn how to navigate these states and these waves, so that then when they go into a psychedelic experience, they're more equipped to basically shift in and out and do that work on an even deeper level, because they've got access to the the gear shifter in their consciousness. So yeah, it's exciting times.
That is incredible, man. And it's like anything, right? Like when computers came out, they were not affordable or practical for almost anyone, right? And now it'd be silly if you didn't have a computer, right? You get looked at like you had 3 heads, And so, it's amazing because as someone who has a business named Highly Optimized, I'm like, this is like got me written all over it,
Yeah.
Plus, one of my core values is the third door, right? So I like to look at ways to make life more efficient. And so for me, like, I'm like, okay, I meditate every day. I do all these things, but it's a slow roll, right? And I want more joy and all of that stuff now, right? And so if I can find a way to third door it, right, and take the secret door and be able to get those results and work smarter, not harder, and be more efficient, why wouldn't I want to do that? And one of the things I'm curious on for you, I don't know if you know anything about this, and I don't know too much about it either, but I've been fascinated with the little bit I've learned is, have you ever heard of Patrick Flanagan before?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was mind blown about last year, I think, when I stumbled upon him, and, of course, his story about like how he truly believed that he was Nikola Tesla, and he had some really wild evidence to back it up that I believe him, and I think he recently passed away, but, he had this device that I forget the name of it, but they would essentially he was like, yeah, you can learn while you sleep. It allows your hemispheres to speak to one another. Do you know anything about that? Because I've been curious to get more info from someone who, not that he didn't explain it well, but he's so in depth into what he does that I think that it was hard for me to understand the basics of it. I didn't know if you had any experience or understanding of that by any chance.
I don't, but it's funny because I'm in very close contact with the people that are managing his foundation, his legacy, and his work and everything. And they I could reach out to them and get hopefully whatever. So was it a device, or is it okay?
Yeah, it was a device. Yep. And
interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because and this might be a little bit of a side quest, but Dr. Abraham Kareem with biogeometry, I'm big into that. And when I found Patrick Flanagan, I was like, this guy's kind of like his like doppelganger, not in terms of look, but in terms of like what they do.
Mhm.
And he just blew me away with this device he had because essentially it was something you wear at night. It was pretty simple. It looked like a cell phone pretty much, and it would allow your basically he said you could put a book on and go to bed, right? And this book, you wouldn't even hear it, right? It would be like in frequency form and things like that. And you'd
Mhm.
wake up in the morning being able to like understand what was in this book. And for
Wow.
someone like me who was like, well, I don't like turning off, I was like, this seems awesome. But I'm also curious, like overall, like if there would be any downsides to that, I have to look into it because I don't know if it would keep you in beta, if it would be able to get you into
Yeah,
theta,
it'd be interesting
you
to
know?
measure your sleep, like some of your sleep metrics and things like that too. But yeah, I'll
Yeah.
definitely find that out and see if I can get a link or more information for you that you can put into the show notes.
Oh, that would be amazing, man. Such a small world. I can't believe the people that run his foundation and
Yeah.
stuff. And yeah, he's one of the many people that I found through Gaia that was just like, how did I not know this person existed? And one of the things I'm curious on for you, and this is something that, again, is just a question for me is, I've had a CES device in the past, which I think is a cranial electro
Mhm.
stimulation device or something. How does that compare to neurofeedback? Are they similar? Are they different? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, there's a bunch of technologies that I have some familiarity with that, and I also there's something called a TCDS. I think it's transcranial
Mm,
dermal stimulation device. I think they work similarly. Yeah, and those work by I think stimulating specific frequencies or electric currents to the brain.
gotcha.
And some of those things, just like photobiomodulation, also they basically can like input frequency. Those can influence your brain waves more on a like a direct frequency level, not a training level. And so there can be growth or gains or improvement through those technologies. It's just a different mechanism. With neurofeedback, your brain is like self-learning how to generate, and those things it's like it's being influenced. And so there's change either way. It's just different the way that it works. But I also know that photobiomodulation, which is just like light stimulation of specific, like you could do it in alpha or gamma or different waves, that technology is also included in the device that I mentioned, Sensei. So you can
Wow.
actually stim with light your brain while you're training,
Wow, that is
which is
amazing,
pretty
man.
cool.
I'm definitely looking into that device. I mean, it's just, I love things like that. Like I love, when you have a really good foundation of healthy eating and all the, the core components, that's where I think biohacking and these kind of things, and I don't even like the term biohacking really because it's really like bioenhancing, is really what it
Yeah.
is. But it's like that's when these things are really good cherries on top. And that's one of the things I tell people is like, listen, if you don't have your diet in order and these kind of things, like,
Mhm.
yes, they'll still help, but like, you want to get those things in touch first. And these kind of devices and this kind of technology allows us to truly live our entire lives in a different state of being. And, it's just very interesting because I see this duality between science and spirituality. And I see this all the time. And I'm like, guys, what if it was both? And what if spirituality created the science and back and forth? And being able to tap in that way is just so cool. And I'm curious for you, like, I know you said, if I remember correctly in the beginning, you had said that you didn't really connect with psychedelics before neurofeedback. Is that accurate?
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
I had it. I did a bunch of intensives. I probably did 4 or 5, like 2 alpha, a theta, and maybe like 2 gamma based intensives before I did like ayahuasca for the first time.
Gotcha.
And I'm sort of like I was alluding to. I'm glad that I did because then once I got into that ayahuasca experience, I was just completely at home. I'd already experienced altered states like just without any substance, and so I could feel myself going in, and I could feel what that state was like, and I could just modulate myself sort of energetically throughout the experience. And if there was fear or contraction or something, I could feel that fully, and I could just be conscious of it and go through it, but with I think a very helpful degree of like non-attachment and just pure experiencing, and then let it run its course and see sort of you see the truth of it and see like that it's impermanent and that it's not a lot of these like lessons that we learn over time, and then let it pass and then see that there's like love on the other there's love and there's joy and there's this expansion on the other side of
Mm.
doing that work, and to just then know that every time one of those sort of heavier waves or movements arises within, that you have the capacity to meet it fully and to go through it and to not rush it or try to run away or escape, but just process it and become fully conscious of it. And to know that then on the other side that there's like more of who you really are.
Yeah, 100%. That was perfectly stated. And, for me, it kind of reminds me of I use gym analogies a lot because it's just like so practical for people to understand. And, for me, it's kind of like if you go into the gym for the first time and you don't really know what to expect and you're working with a trainer that knows how to get you a good pump, halfway through, you might be like, oh my God, what is all this feeling? Oh, I want to get away from it, right? Mm-hmm. But the more that you keep going to the gym, you almost look for that burn, right? You're like, it's not even a good workout without that burn, right? So you've now changed your entire story surrounding what that burn is, how long it lasts, and what its purpose is. Mm-hmm. And so I think that like this is a very synonymous type thing, right? Like the more that we train our brain waves through neurofeedback, or even like, someone like Hamilton Souther, who's done ayahuasca thousands and thousands of times because he's a shaman, right? Like he's mm-hmm. probably understood something that is relevant to this, right? In terms of like different states he can get into. But for most of us, that's not going to be the case, right? So trying to train our brain waves or even like understand these different states through psychedelics would be challenging and probably a little irresponsible from how often you have to do them. But what I love about this is, like I said before, it's like having your cake, eating it too, and it's gluten-free, where now like throughout your entire life, like, your brain waves really signify everything in life, right? Your ability to respond, your ability to mm-hmm. either respond or react. And so like being able to train these brain waves allows you to live a much more conscious life, and I'm curious for you, like, let's talk about before these intensives and after. What were some of the main differences you noticed, aside from like, some of the ones we already talked about, but like, were there any like changes that maybe happened that you didn't expect, or ones that were kind of like, oh, wow, I didn't think this would happen, but this is a really cool thing to have happen? Were there any things like that?
Yeah. And there were some things, I'll say there are some things that like a lot of positives that I noticed, and also things like, because I had these such profound experiences and I had these off the charts sort of like measures that I thought that I would be, things that I thought I would be clear of or free from, which I wasn't. And that I had to like, it really taught me a lot more about the work that is required to really transcend a pattern. So I'll talk about both. I think, what was amazing was, being able to access higher states of consciousness, like throughout my life, like every day, if I want in meditation or just if I want to pause and be, it's almost like having a dial to how much joy or bliss you can experience. It's like you can put your hand on the dial and like basically turn it up or turn it down as like it's appropriate, because it's not always appropriate to just be like super blissed out to the point where you can barely, you can barely speak, right? Yeah, exactly. So having that dial has been amazing, because I think that human beings, when we don't have that access to that dial, it's very disempowering. It's like then we're searching for external sources of joy. But when you know that you can sort of access joy or bliss anytime you want from within, just through your own nervous system, there is a level of freedom and empowerment, I think, that happens there that, you still might, we all have our conditioning. And so we all still look towards like external things. But I just think what happened for me over time is that I became less dependent or reliant or fixated on those outer things, at least as sources of happiness for me. And so I was able to navigate, like, and if something hurt me or something didn't feel good or I felt frustrated, like, it's just so much easier to get through it, because again, that thing wasn't making me, it wasn't a cause of my happiness or my well-being or whatever. And so that was a big thing. And being able to be, again, access higher states of consciousness, but not be living in a tent someplace, or whatever, like to actually be in the world and to still work and be in business and do everything. I think that's what most people want, is that capacity to be their best spiritually and to realize their full spiritual potential, and yet still be in the world. And whether it's have a family or a job or a mission, big mission or career, or to be of service to humanity, because ultimately I do believe our consciousness is the highest service that we can give. but to being able to act and to build or create from a higher state of consciousness, I think is also incredibly valuable and rewarding and important for us as human beings. And so I was increasingly more able to do that. And I noticed, especially with gamma, that I just became more magnetic. I would just attract opportunities. Like, I think you become so pure in your heart and in your energy that people just want to be around you or give things to you or to connect or collaborate. And so a year and a half ago, for example, I met this guy at an event and we became really good friends. And then beginning of last year, he brought this, I was hosting a party and he brought this musician to the party. And this musician turned out to be his crypto mentor. And she was a billionaire and she helped him become a billionaire in crypto. And they're like, we want to create a group that combines crypto consciousness and and wealth and mission. And I was like, wow. And I'd already been having visions of something like this. And so, and I didn't try for that. Like, I wasn't actively like seeking it even. It's just something that I think as your energy just gets more and more purified through a combination, not just of neurofeedback, but even psychedelics. Like by that time, I had done many experiences and I think released and cleared and opened up a lot in my heart and in my field. And so just spontaneous things like that would happen and still do. And so those are just some of the things I've noticed. One of the things though that has been very illuminating is I still think it's super important. I've been also engaged in this work with another mentor who he has a teacher, this guru is named Adidas Samraj, and they had this whole really incredible process that they call it emotional sexual patterning. And basically it's this process of becoming fully conscious of all of your emotional and sexual, like the way that you would relate, like starting from childhood, but till the present. Because essentially the premise is that we all have this ego. The way that they look at ego is it's like contraction. So in our normal enlightened state, we're fully expanded. We're not contracted at all. But egoity is like contracting into the mind. And it's basically like withdrawing. And so like when someone hurts us or we feel like a lack of love, we're essentially contracting into the mind inward. And so we all have a script that we unconsciously like repeat over and over again in the way that we contract. And we see that it's mirrored back to us in all our relationships, professional, romantic, family. And the more conscious you can become of that script that you have that keeps repeating over and over again, the more freedom basically you have in that full awareness of it to actually make a different choice. And so all of this stuff, it really comes down, I believe, like psychedelics, neurofeedback. You've said this a few times here, so I know you already know this, but it all comes back to being fully conscious. Like the more fully conscious we are of everything, like even in the context of like what I was saying, this patterning, like let's say I feel rejected by a partner and then my heart tightens and then I have certain thoughts and then I withdraw my attention or my energy or my love to punish them. And then they, and it's like this whole thing and it's all automated and it's all unconscious. But when you become fully conscious of that, then you're like, oh, I see what's happening here. Like, I know how this is going to play out. And this isn't really me. This is just a reaction, kind of a sequence that I inherited. And then and then in that process, you're like, oh, I don't actually have to go through with this. This doesn't serve me to try to withdraw my love and punish the other person. Like I could actually just stay in a state of love when I feel hurt. It's challenging. That's the work, but you can actually do that. And that was like one of my biggest revelations at even the last psychedelic experience I did in the fall. I did ayahuasca with an amazing group of friends in this place in New York. And what was the thing that really stood out like most for me was I just saw that suffering was an unconscious activity, and that the more conscious I became of this activity, like of how I contracted or withdrew and literally contracted in my physiology and thought and emotionally, And then I could see that I was doing that over and over again, like a broken record. And then I could see like, I got to the point where I was like, wow, this is actually a choice. This is an activity that I am just unconsciously repeating, and then I can stop it. And then I started to like be able to say, oh, in that moment, I was like, oh, I literally ceased it. And then I felt like this freedom of I'm not suffering anymore. And I don't have to keep suffering in the same way. And that was a way, I think, in which, one of the big, in my opinion, one of the big benefits of psychedelics is that the enhanced awareness or sensitivity to see at a level maybe that you don't see in your normal. And it's the same with brainwaves or anything that alters your perception or your vision, your ability to see. And so that was like, it was really profound. And all of this is to say that I think it's very key to I guess this gets into integration, but it's like to keep doing that work even after you have these insights or you have these revelations. It's still, because the way that these patterns work, they'll just keep unconsciously running in the background until we become so aware of them that, just like a fist, that like we don't know where, it's almost like if you didn't know you were clenching your fist all the time, and then you like look at it and you realize, oh my god, I'm clenching my fist, and then you can actually relax the fist. But you have to see that, and then you have to actually relax it and stop clenching the fist. And that is work that usually extends beyond the journey, beyond the neurofeedback. It's a moment to moment like practice and daily practice.
Yeah, that is the work, and that was so beautifully stated, man. And it really illuminates a lot for me. What I found is that, like that fist analogy, right? It'd be one thing if all you had was you sitting in a chair, and so it was easier for you to see this fist, right? But now picture, billions of people around you, cell phones going off, business, people asking you things, right? So how easy is it to keep your hand in that fist, right? Then also to open it, right? Well, just like anything, it takes practice, right? Like if you want to get good at anything,
Yep.
it takes devotion, right? And it takes a deep enough why to understand why you're doing it, And again, to use a gym analogy, it's like, when people start working out, oftentimes they get asked like, why are you working out? They're like, well, it'll look good in a bikini or whatever. And it's like, is that going to get you up at 5 a.m. when it's raining out to go run outside? Probably not, like,
Yeah.
but having a why, like I want to be around when my kids get married, that's a why that will get you up at 5 a.m. So being able to understand that, like, we are our own biggest cheerleaders. We must be, right? And no one's going to come save the day for us. That to me is my why. My why is, I mean, it's more than that too, but that's like the bedrock of it is like, hey, it's up to me. And the great thing is it's also up to me, right? So like at the end of the day, like it can be looked at as like, oh my God, it's all up to me. But it's actually like, no, it's all up to me. So if I know that I can do this, which I do, then it's only a matter of time, right? And what else am I going to do anyway? The time's going to go by anyway, And that's like the really funny thirst trap of the mind is like, this is going to take too long. It's like, well, what else are we going to be doing? Like we're going to be here anyway. Might as well do something that's going to give me a higher quality of life, And I'm curious for you, like that thing you were talking about with that individual, the emotional sexual stuff, is that like, I imagine that's something that's not technological driven, like neurofeedback, or is that like, tell me a little bit more about that. I'm just genuinely curious about this.
It's really, it's a really profound process. Like basically this person had seen me have like, because one of my biggest challenging areas in life has been relationships. I think I came into this lifetime with a lot of like very strong patterns around relationships and love. And I would like abandon my purpose and like, I was like romantic, but crazy. And so, I would have a whole series of really crazy relationship experiences, and I'm also very giving and healing. So I think I would tend to attract people who had a lot of trauma or need to like do a lot of healing as well. And so I would repeat like a lot of the same things over and over again in relationships. And so part of the process is just it's first of all just describing everything that I would do. Like we would map it out, and I would write a journal or whatever to say like, okay, this happened, I did this, and then go a level, and then there's through a process of inquiry where I could say like, okay, how did I feel, or what did I experience, what thoughts arose, what was happening when internally when I made this decision to to travel when I shouldn't have traveled, when I had a lot of work and I neglected something or whatever it was. And then what's amazing is like if you do this over multiple, present relationship over multiple relationships, you see that the same things are happening
You're like,
over.
shit.
It's like, yeah. And really what's been mind blowing to me recently is like, I've also just seen how it's not just the relationships, a lot of times, especially for me, have been the most extreme sort of like mirror for it, but it's actually a lot of the patterns just they subtly operate with money, with work, with other things. If you're afraid of speaking up for whatever reason, like it could be shame or whatever it is, and in a romantic relationship, or you're trying to please the other person because you fear you're not good enough, and there's all these things that arise in you that will generally happen in work or the way that you relate to money or the way that you relate to like other domains of life. And so they cut across. And so the power of it is just really seeing, okay, like I do this and this and this and this, and it's this automated. And when you see how like automatic it is and like unconscious it is, and like how it's just this chain reactions, it creates this like it depersonalizes it a bit, because I think so often with one of the downsides to healing work is sometimes we over identify with like our issues and our things, and like we become so almost like in love with these things that like we keep them, and like, or we end up strengthening them. And so in the way that this is done, you see it just much more objectively, and almost in a little bit of a more of a depersonalized way. And then you realize it's just this automatic sequence, and then you can just stand back from it and observe it, and then it will keep repeating, but with that greater awareness and non-attachment, then you're like, oh, okay, this is operating. And then it's almost like the higher mind or higher self is able to start coming into awareness more, and being like, oh wait, I actually don't really need to like play that out for like the 80th time. We kind of know how that, like, we know where that like movie, we know how that movie ends, and it's like we've seen it enough times, and so that's basically it at a high level. Not a lot of people practice it. I mean, I think everybody does some degree, but this is a very specific process, and it comes from this like one specific lineage that like I said, has a certain view on egoity as this unconscious like self contraction. And I think for me, it's been really useful, because there have been a lot of things that like changes that I've wanted to make through neurofeedback or psychedelics, and I still like wasn't able to make them. But through this process, combined with the awareness from those other things, it's like it's all together. It's not like either or, but for me, it's been one of the missing, or like one of those additional pieces that really helped me make change, and just integrate on a much deeper level. So yeah.
Yeah, man, that's wild, because, it's funny when you were mentioning that, it's like, I know so many people that are always healing. They always need healing work, and again, it's no judgment. It's just like, you don't want to get into the wounded healer either, being like, oh, because, a lot of these individuals, they're also coaches and whatnot. And for me, I believe healing can be light. I believe it can be fun. When it comes up, I'll deal with it, but I'm not going looking for it, depending on like, what you choose to believe. If you look into Kabbalah, it's the abyss. If you look into, different organizations and different practices, it's different things, the shadow, whatever. But the more you dig, the more you'll find, right? Because you can tap into the collective shadow as well. And so at the end of the day, though, I love what you said about the ego, because it is true. Like, the ego is the compartmentalizer. It is the contraction. Like, that is what it is. And it's not that it's not useful or not handy, but it's just, again, like, having that awareness allows you to truly have an ability to discern and use discernment to a higher degree. And I think that is so important, because if there's one muscle that I found is more important than anything, especially in today's world, it's discernment, and really the name of the game starts where the name of the game is transformation, and it starts with self-awareness. You can't have anything without that awareness. And so Anthony, my man, this has been absolutely amazing. I can't believe we already went through an hour. I got to have you back on because I am genuinely so curious about these modalities. And I definitely want the info for that other place too, because I'd love to check it out. But, first I want to get into where people can find you, where they can connect with you, anything you got going on. Tell the people where they can find you, man.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, my main social media is Instagram, and I just write poetry by Anthony. So
Cool.
I publish some spiritual quotes, some life stuff, things like that there. That's the biggest, yeah, that's the best place. And then, yeah, I'm getting more deeply immersed into this world of neurofeedback, starting to talk and yeah, just help people. Like my mission is to really raise consciousness. The visions that I had when I was doing a lot of these trainings was to essentially aligned with Hawkins in the sense that we have leaders, or we have people that are already influencing like millions or billions of people, and if we can raise their level of consciousness, it's exponential, and that could be one of the most efficient ways to help the planet. And so with the crypto group that I mentioned, and even moving towards creating centers like neurofeedback and biohacking centers and that explore consciousness research and everything. My goal is to attract leaders and to develop protocols like through with gamma and all of these different modalities and different things to essentially find the most efficient way to raise consciousness and functioning in leadership so that we can positively influence billions of people as quickly as possible.
That is unreal, man. Count me in for that mission because I would love to be a part of that. It's funny. I actually, during a medicine experience with cannabis, my buddy Chase and I talk about this often. We were down in Virginia in that beautiful, like alpha wave state of just like joy and all of these things. And we started having this ridiculous theory, right? And, the theory was, okay, everyone is focused on helping the little guy, which is a great pursuit. Great intention, sounds great, right? And it is great. But if we keep going to help all the little people, and I mean by little people, I mean people that are struggling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we can only make so much of an impact. But if on the other hand, what we do instead is, and this is the ridiculous part of it, we were like, there's so many people over in like Saudi Arabia and places like that have billions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
And they probably think that because they have all this money that they've figured life out, there's nothing that can make life more fun, yada, yada. Well, what if you go over there and you show them a kick-ass time and you get even one or two of those people to change their mind, change their consciousness? Now you can free up all of that money for someone to go, oh my God, like I want to help the planet, right? You free up one or two of those people, you could help so many of the people struggling
Oh my
at
God,
once.
yes. You see
So
exactly.
funny you had that too. Yeah.
Yeah, you see the same thing. And
Yeah.
in a Hawkins like level, bringing someone from like below 200, which is like the disempowered level, to like above 200 is powerful, but it's infinitely more powerful to take someone who's in mind like in the 400s and get them into the heart and get them into like and there's a lot of powerful people I believe are in like the 3 or 400s level. They just haven't stepped into the heart fully, and if we can get those people to have more spiritual experiences and heart consciousness in their lives, and like you said, and they've got resources and power and influence, that will change the planet like more rapidly than anything else.
100% because they have the influence,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
and who doesn't want more joy? It's like, nah, count me out for that. I don't want more joy and enlightenment and fun in life, said no
Yes.
one ever.
Yes.
Anthony, I got one last question for you, man, and that is
Right.
this, right? So let's say someone listens to this conversation and they're fired up to look into psychedelics in their own life. What is the one piece of advice that you would suggest to them to allow them to properly use discernment in choosing whether or not these medicines are right for them?
Yeah, I would say that like to go through a deep process of self inquiry, and it's really to utilize. I think we've talked about a lot of tools like external things like neurofeedback or other things, but I think just meditating and going and inquiring within and being able to give yourself space and not make a rush or impulse decision. It's sort of like what I was talking about with the patterning. Like the more the conscious you become. So in my case, I would see when I would make the difference between making like a deeply considered decision that was really integrated with my whole being, higher level, heart, everything, versus making more of a pattern decision which was usually more like impulse. And it was just like, oh, this is exciting. I'm going to go do that. And I think we all sort of know that difference, but I think you've got to pause and give yourself the space to say, all right, am I doing this from like impulse, or am I doing this from like a deeper place of feeling and consideration, and really holding that sacred space before you make the decision, and then seeing what comes up. And if it's a yes, then do it. But be really honest with yourself. If it's like, oh, I just want to do it because I'm rushing, or it's just an exciting impulse, then to actually like pause and wait and trust that like the right time will come.
I love that, man. I mean, that is like the foundation of everything, right? With anything in life. And why would psychedelics be any different, right? Self-inquiry, self-reflection, understanding where is this a calling or a craving to escape, or any of these things? And that does take self-reflection, right? It takes some time sometimes. And so I absolutely love that. And guys, was that some of the most wild stuff you've heard recently, or what? Anthony is an absolute master in his field. And when I meet others who are devoted to their progression as spiritual beings like Anthony is, it supercharges my own devotion to continue asking myself how much more I can open up to and receive within my life. For anyone looking to get in touch with Anthony and keep up on all of his latest adventures and curiosities, check out the show notes for this show, where I will be laying out exactly how to do so. Anthony, thank you so much for sharing your time, wisdom, and experiences with us on the show today, for red-pilling the world at large and allowing each person that meets you to recognize what is possible for them in their own lives with regards to optimizing their vessel, and for being such an amazing and kind-hearted soul. And until next time, my brother, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.